What's up, you guys? It's your girl, Nicole in Gray. To be clear, hashtag the gray area. What's up, y'all? It is a little after 5. It is 5:15, but it's still 5. It's still 5 o'clock. So I posted that I was going to come live to share my opinion about the Amber Guyger case. So I am on. I'm live. And what's up, Chandel? I just wanted to take some time to just share my thoughts because I feel from my timeline and just from conversations that I've had with people that there is a lot of hurt that is surrounding this particular case, the verdict, and people are very expressive about it. And what's up, Dalta? What's up, Ricky? What's up, Ricky? What's going on, sis? What's going on, Donna? So, Donna and I talk a lot about current events. So this is one of those times. I want a few other people to come on, one in particular, and the person who drove me to do this live, my nephew. So my nephew asked me much of nothing. So when he asked my opinion about the case, I could tell that it was coming from a place of concern, major concern. He is hurt. There are just a lot of feelings, right? There are a lot of emotions that surround this particular case. And so that's why I am here particularly today. And another thing, I want to test something out right quick on y'all. The last time that I was live was my first time going live when I did the coverage of the third Democratic National Debate at Texas Southern University. I enjoyed my time going live. I wasn't sure if it was part of my content or if it was a platform for me, but I think that it is. Live is a place where we can talk. I'm not just talking at people. We can actually converse. We can talk about the things that you actually want to hear. Now, I have my cousin who is on now, who is actually in the area. So this is a conversation that I hope that she will join because you just joining. What's up, Carmen? Khalil is who drove me here, and he called me to ask me about my opinion, and he never does. So I was just trying to wait around to see if he comes on. But why I'm here particularly today is because, one, some of you who already know me, everybody who's on right now knows me, but I'm going to download this video to my YouTube channel and just kind of save it for their audience to go back and listen to at their leisure. But the reason why this particular case is so important for me to come on and talk about, because what I feel is promoting so much of an emotional response is the conflation of issues, right? And if y'all know me, right? Y'all know that I hate conflation of issues. That's my pet peeve, when we stuff everything all in one box. I call it painting bright lines with broad strokes, right? And I always give this example about, hey, Joyelle, what's going on? Thank you for joining me live. But I always give this example about conflation of issues that I think drives the point home. If you think about outlining a coin, right? If you are a painter and you're trying to outline a coin-sized circle, right? If you use a paintbrush that has a broad, y'all help me out, the broad tip, okay? If you use a paintbrush that has a broad tip to outline the circle, you're inevitably going to get paint inside that circle in an area that wasn't intended, and also outside of the circle in an area that wasn't intended. So when we paint with these broad strokes, these delicate issues that could just deserve a benefit of some teasing out, just some separation of the things that's going on. But when we paint these broad strokes, we have a mess, right? We have this overflow of concern where there may not be, right, that area that wasn't intended, that we got paint inside the circle, or this area of concern that we're creating fires so that we can put out that stuff that's outside of the circle. So what I feel right now that drives a lot of the angst is conflation of issues. And I really feel that point, what's up, Risa? I really feel that point was made so clear. And Risa, the reason why I'm here, and I'm not going to take too long, the reason why I'm here is to talk about the Botham Jean case. And I led in with the conflation of issues, right? Just too many issues all taken at once is the reason why I feel people are so anxious and so much anxiety is felt about this. But you have so many things going on here. And this case, from the grand jury selection to the prosecution and the conviction, out of all of the standards, what's up, daughter? Out of all of the standards that you can measure this case by, was a win, right? And that is not something that goes down very easily, because the expression, what is being felt by so many, is something that was expressed by a mother that stood with Botham Jean's mother at her closing remarks. She said that how many lives will it take for there to be justice for us? And how many lives will it take for people to realize that Black lives matter, right? Now, and I'm gonna get to that point in just a minute. Donna raised a very good point of why people are upset, but that feeling that was expressed by that mother whose son was killed in Arlington by the Arlington PD in 2017. I think her last name was Crane. Her last name was Crane. She expressed, I believe, what a lot of people are feeling right now about this issue. And it's a weight that this case carried, because there was not just justice for Botham Jean that was sought by many people in this case. The justice that was sought by many people in this case was something that this case couldn't give, right? Which was justice for all of the others who have not received justice for their untimely deaths, right? So I believe a lot of the angst is driven by that. And Donna is raising some really good points that I'm just about to get to in a minute. But the reason why I wanted to do this video is because, like Donna is enumerating her points, that's what I feel is necessary when we tackle these issues, because when we conflate them, we cannot get to the point, right? And I bring up another example when I talk about the conflation of issues. And it is also, what's up, Chantel? It is also with the conflation of issues, meaning just painting issues with broad strokes and not teasing out what the real problem is. When you have something like that, I give the example of your car being broke, right? You could say to someone, man, my car is raggedy, right? My car just don't work. That's an issue, and that's a problem, a big problem, right? Or it could be a small problem, because you could identify the issue, painting it more with a fine line, saying, my car doesn't work because my blinker, is out, or my car is raggedy because my air doesn't work. When you are more fine-tuned with when you attack the problem, that's how you can provide a solution. So let's just tease tease out this case and the way that I see these situations, and the reason why I come on live, and the reason why I feel that these things are so important to me is, or why it's so important to me to just share information and talk about our perspectives, is because with greater perspective is more understanding, right? And going from the first point where I started, where I said, from all measures, the case was, you're right, Joel. It is very, very difficult for people to just join the two. But the reason, going back, why I said that this case was a win by all measures, right? Because this was an instance where the system worked. Now, you come up with a case where the prosecutors or the state tried to, hey, Erica, we have someone else that is in the area that can add value to this conversation. We're trying to just tease out the issues and trying to get to the root of some of our anxieties so that we can, simmer down a little bit, and find, look at the situation with an eye for opportunity and find areas where we can make this a stepping point for going on to get greater wins, right? And where I am right now is this was a win by all statistical measures, right? When you talk about what was expected of the system. Now, the system is supposed to work where you have a prosecutor who either brings charges, where in this case, the prosecutor brought a charge of manslaughter, right? And that was for the easy win, of course, because there is this thing here in America where cops have this gray area that I'm going to talk about just a little bit later, that they can claim that there he is, there's my nephew who sparked all this conversation. But there is this thing in this country where prosecutors have to fight beyond this gray area of fear for cops' lives being a reasonable justification for killing someone. Now, that gray area that exists right there, and where I am right now, Khalil, is I'm just trying to tease out a little bit of the information to get to a point where we can quell some of the angst. And right now I'm just talking about how, by all measures of statistics, that this was a win, right? From a win in the sense that this was a time where the system actually worked. And although the outcome brings about a lot of emotion because there was more riding on this case than just the justice for Botham Jean and through the prosecution of Amber Guyger. I brought up another mother who stood with Botham Jean's mom, who expressed a lot of the angst that is felt because there was a weight that was carried by this case of so many others that did not receive justice. But getting back to my point on how this was a win, the way that this case played out with the prosecutor bringing a charge of manslaughter at first to get a more solid path to conviction, that's pretty typical. The grand jury upped those charges to murder. That was an opportunity where our system worked. Here in Texas in 2015, right before the grand jury was going to be seated in the Sandra Bland case, the rules changed for seating grand juries. It wasn't this tap on the shoulder thing where the judge had so much influence on picking the grand jury. So there's an instance there where we see where the system worked, because here the grand jury took a charge of manslaughter, looked at the evidence that was presented by the prosecutor, something that they, that the prosecutor had to present to them, and they returned back a charge that was murder, which was the correct charge in my opinion, although some criminal legal analysts feel that the charge should have been just manslaughter. But I believe the consensus is already there because the verdict is in and she's a convicted murderer. So I believe that that was seen and that was proven in the case, which brings me to my next point of another win, right? Here in this case, the judge had the duty to keep that case in Dallas because that was the only way that she would get a jury of her peers. So that means that people who were affected, who are affected by the DPD and who are, are living with the laws that are prosecuted by the DA there, it was her duty to keep the case there, and she did. Okay? Another win along the system. Now, the prosecution put on its case, and it got a conviction. It did not settle for a plea bargain, which we know in a lot of instances when you have people who do not have prior records, right? When they come to the system, a lot of times, regardless of what the offense is, they receive some type of plea deal or with some type of community supervision where they don't serve jail time. So not only did they get the right charge, they got the conviction. And on top of the conviction, they got a jail sentence, which was double the minimum. Now, all of those statistics don't quell the angst, right? But if you're looking at just the case that was presented there, it was a statistical win for not only the Dallas County DAs, but also for justice for Botham Jean. Because we know so many times that our system does not always punish crimes as we see that they should be. So that's one part of the issue. Now, there were a lot of things that Donna brought up, and I'm just going to go back because I wasn't a fan of the way that the case was prosecuted, right? I'm going to just say that. I was not a fan of the way that, hey, Kelly, it's good to have you on. You are in the area, so you can add value to the conversation. Please chime in. What's up, everybody? Please chime in. Please let me know how you're feeling. I'm going to go back and look at some of the things that Donna has to say because I wasn't a fan of the way that the case was prosecuted. But I cannot say that me being a non-fan changes my view of that the case was a win, right? I did not like a lot of the way the case was dealt with, starting from the state violating the gag order. Now, normally you have the defense be the one that tries to step out there and get the story spun out, especially when there is a defendant like the one that they had. But that was an unusual thing that I felt was for her benefit. And I did not like the... Now this, y'all know I'm crazy and I'm amongst family. I didn't like that Chitlin circuit stomping around like Reese and Cephas she did when... it was when she found out that they violated the order. It was, I just didn't like, I thought it was a bit inappropriate, right? I just didn't like the presentation. But that's her courtroom. I don't have a robe. Her Honor can conduct her courtroom any way that she sees fit. When I go into a courtroom, I address every judge in their courtroom as Her Honor, His Honor, Your Honor, them honor, because it's their courtroom. And the courtroom that they have is due to their election or appointment. So the fact that I didn't like the way that she stomped around and, declared her disbelief. I didn't like the presentation. I thought that it could have been handled with a little more decorum. Like saying that they were in contempt, assessing a punishment, and proceeding. But that's just my like. I also did not like that they took the onus off of Guyger by giving the castle defense. Now, giving instructions on the castle defense. Now, the castle defense is much like stand your ground. Most of you know what stand your ground is because of the Zimmerman case. So it's basically a defense for you to be able to defend yourself in your home. And the judge gave instructions for this particular defense, and I didn't think that she had to do that. Now, there is some argument. The question that Khalil asked was it appropriate for her to hug her? Oh yes. We'll get to that chilling circuitry because I don't think it was appropriate to hug her. But that's one of the things that I did not like about the case. But like I said, those were likes. But there is going to be a point where the judge's hug comes into play. But going just through the case about the things that that didn't sit well with us about this case, and I think that I share some of these with you, and from some of the comments and some of the things that I've read, is like that castle defense. I believe, from my professional opinion, and again, I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I did all my work, passed all my classes. I am a member of the bar. So in my professional opinion, I feel that that was an argument that Guyger would have had to make on appeal, right? It was an argument that she made there. The judge was the gatekeeper on whether or not that instruction was one that applied in that case. And to me, her saying, no, this doesn't apply, and not giving it would have been well within rights, because she wasn't in her home. She made a mistake, and mistake is no defense to the law. So I didn't like the fact that she gave the castle defense, and despite the argument that she gave it so that she could foreclose that argument for Guyger at appeal, I just feel like she didn't have to do that. That was Guyger's argument to make. So beyond that, we get to what Donna was saying about let's see, I'm just reading a little bit of we were said that the jury was instructed to give the white officer a lower sentence. So again, I didn't like the jury instruction when they were in the sentencing phase, that they could consider the lower range of sentencing for manslaughter. So there were a lot of things that I did not like about the prosecution of this case, and going all the way down to the judge's hug of Guyger. Again, I feel that was, basically, it was some chitlin circuit shit. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't like that at all. And really, the consequences in the real world is that the case does not end with Guyger's conviction. She has a right to appeal. So the judge that presides over the case is the judge that presides over her case. And now the judge that is going to preside over this case through an appeal, which will likely be, because any good lawyer would suggest so, because if you don't appeal, you lose the right to do so. Her hugging Guyger was inappropriate. It just, the function of the judge is to remain unbiased. And there is an inherent bias that goes along with the judge hugging and praying for the defendant. Now, regardless of the spiritual movement that was there, because I do understand moves of God, I do respect them, and I do know that they're real, irrespective of what that played into it, irrespective of the spiritual move of God going on in that courtroom, there will likely be some issue with her continuing to preside over the case after physically showing that she had some sympathy or empathy for that particular defendant. So, and especially if there are issues raised that, that action is peculiar, because that doesn't happen in courtrooms. Judges, remain unbiased because that's their job. They normally render their sentences, bang their gavel, loosen their robes and walk on off back to the chambers. So, hey, Zaraka, how's it going? So we're just talking about trying to tease out some of the issues that were going on with this case and why people are so anxious right now, and just trying to quell some of that angst by getting to what really happened. And I started this off by saying that, if you follow me a bit, you know that conflation of issues is one of my biggest things. So that's what we're doing. We're just trying to not paint the issue with such a broad stroke of this being the win or the vindication for so many injustices that we've seen over the last few years in particular. But out of all measures, that was a win when you see how the system worked, in that the new grand jury rules here in Texas allowed a grand jury to be picked that went against the initial thought of the prosecutor, right? That was a win for the system and a win for how we make the system work. Then again, like I said, when you get to the prosecution of the case, again, I didn't like the way that it was prosecuted. There were lots of things that I didn't like about it. But again, if I had a camera on me at my job, regardless of the outcomes that I produced, there would be someone that would find fault in the way that I did things. And that's just the reality of it. There's always a critique when you're an outsider looking in. So even though I didn't like the prosecution, I feel that there was also another win in the way that they picked a jury that would not just be able to empathize with Guyger's fear, but also one that was able to empathize with the community, right? So this one thing, I don't know, something crazy came up on my screen. I hope you guys can still see me, but another thing about this particular case, after we are able to digest that, first, that this was a win on so many levels for how the system works, I want to just take the time to have that eye for opportunity, because when you have an action plan, there is always an ease of anxiety, right? When you have a plan of how can I take what just happened here, go forward and make some needed changes, it just automatically quells your anxiety because you have some steps to take. So here, eye for opportunity, that's the way I look at things. Civic duty. I mean, this is something that I stress a lot, and the reason why I do the political commentary that I do is civic duty is also important at every single level. If you see the prosecutor elected, the judges elected, appointed by someone who's elected, the laws that are enforced are ones that are made up by the legislature who we elect. All of these things that make up the law and the way that they are, number one, enforced, because we also elect the top cops. the way that these laws are enforced, prosecuted, and there is an opportunity there for us at every level with our civic duty of voting, right? The laws that are on the books, very crucial. It's like the civic duty, once we get involved and we vote and we say, this is the person that we pick to represent us, it doesn't end there. We have to hold them accountable and make them put things on the books that make jobs easier for DAs and prosecutors who bring the right charges. I'll give an example that makes that more plain. Now, we have one of those weights that made this case a lot heavier, which was the death of Freddie Gray in Baltimore. Now, Marilyn Mosby, who... Thanks, Erica. How's it going? The Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore was also a courageous prosecutor. She brought the highest charge against the officers who were responsible for the death of Freddie Gray. When she was not able to get the prosecution, right? And that didn't have anything to do with the job that she did. When she was not able to get, when she was not able to get the prosecution that she wanted in that case, she gave us all a clue, right? And she said, the reason why I'm not able to make this case stick, it is because I don't have the law to back it, right? And so what's missing in those situations for those for those prosecutors who are willing to bring the right charges in a lot of times, again, ends with our civic duty, right? The laws that are on the books. Our votes don't just, that's not where our voice ends. That's probably the tune-up, okay? The vote is our tune-up. When we hold these lawmakers accountable and we let them know what's important to us and the laws that we want them to make, that's where we get to change things. So Marilyn Mosby giving us that hint means this. If prosecutors, so in the case of, in a murder case, like here in Texas or in any state, most people have seen like Legally Blonde and all those movies, but you have the act and you have the mental state that also goes along with the act. So the prosecutor's job is not only to prove that something happened, but in order to get these different levels of offenses, they also have to prove that the person who did the thing acted in a particular way, right? So that thing that they have to prove, that mens rea, that they have to prove a lot of times in a murder case or in any other case, ranges from intentional, negligent, wanton disregard. There's a few different mental states, right? And to get a murder case or one that is of the highest charge, normally there is a level of intent that is required. So what Marilyn Mosby said, and look who just joined in, a Tuskegee University graduate, and Marilyn Mosby happened to have graduated from Tuskegee University. So the Baltimore DA, the hint that she gave, and that helps us go forward with action steps, is that the laws that would have helped her make that prosecution are things that prescribe officers' actions, right? And what I mean by that is, if it is negligent for an officer to restrain somebody by putting their hand around their neck, that makes that prosecutor able to prove negligence by the simple act of an officer putting their hand around someone's neck to restrain them. So again, the opportunity comes with our civic duty. When we cast our votes for people that we feel that we can trust to go forward with our messaging. And after we do that, we hand them the baton and we hold them accountable for going to the Hill or wherever else and hammering it in, going in and getting the laws on the books that make a difference in our lives. The bridge from getting the prosecutor who is willing to bring the charge of murder for these killings, the bridge, hey Cookie, the bridge from getting those charges to the prosecution, a lot of times simply lies in the laws that are on the books that help them prove their case. So that gray area that exists, that fear that I was talking about earlier, that drives a lot of our angst, because a lot of the cases that have been decided unjustly have fell on the fact that juries have empathized with the fear that police officers feel in just doing their jobs. So giving or arming prosecutors with the right laws, again, lies with our civic duty. That making sure that we elect someone that we can trust, that has, number one, an initial clue about what's important to us, and then pressuring them at every turn to make sure that they augment the system in a way that works for us. So one way that worked, like I said, here in Texas, and that had I believe a huge effect on this case, because like I said, the prosecutor's initial charge or initial thought was manslaughter, right? That was the easiest case to prove. That is the easier case to prove because it has a lower standard required for the mental state. So there's not the intentional conduct that's necessary there. There's just conduct that's reckless that results in the act, the death of someone. So the manslaughter would have been an easier case to prove, and one that would have been a more shoe-in for a win. But our system worked big time with that grand jury reform. And these are things that we don't pay enough attention to, and that really augment our lives, really shape the way our existence feels. And it's, hey Dietrich, the way that the system worked initially in this case with that grand jury reform is that in the legislative session that changed the way that grand juries were selected, there was a big push for that in the background of the protests for Black Lives Matter. That's something that didn't receive a huge highlight in the national news because protests are more sensational. But the work that was going on in a lot in the background here in Texas was that change in the way that grand juries are selected. Before, grand juries were selected by something, and I think I might get the name kind of mixed up, but it was kind of like a pat on the shoulder, right? The judge had a lot of influence in the pick of the grand jury because they patted the person, or they selected handpicked the person. That's it. They cherry picked the jury foreman or the grand jury. The right words are escaping me, but the person, the commissioner, the person who commissioned the grand jury, the judge had used to handpick that person. And with all of the backlash that was occurring from these convictions that were coming back, or not the convictions that were coming back, but the charges that were being presented and the no bills that were coming back from the grand jury, who were saying that they were not going to even proceed with charges against these officers. Those concerns are what drove the change in the way that grand juries are selected here in Texas. That had a big impact on the case that was just settled, this Amber Guyger case. Because like I said, the prosecutor went in with an initial thought of the win being one for manslaughter, an easier case to prove, and one that she probably would have pled guilty for because the sentencing is a lot lighter. She stood to only serve 2 to 20 years if convicted. But that is a stage in where we see our civic duty in action, because in a number of ways, because we pick our lawmakers do the job of our representation, going down and making sure the laws are on the books that really matter to us. What's up, cuz? That's a point where the system worked. The legislature, in 2015 here in Texas, they made sure that the rules were changed, right? Hey, Tracy. So once they did that, that made a difference in how this case would have turned out. Because if, in my opinion, because if the way that the feel or the vibe of it was, if the judge would have picked that grand jury commissioner, I don't know if it would have been someone who would have had inherent bias like we've seen in these other cases. But even with, I'll say this. It may have been, and I say the reason why I feel like there may have been this inherent bias if the rule would not have changed the way it did before, is right after the first case to come before a Texas grand jury following the change of the rules on how judges pick grand juries was the Sandra Bland case. So in that case, the rule was it didn't go into effect before that grand jury was seated, but they followed the new rules anyway. But what happened was that the judge in that case then picked the grand jury foreman. So you see where when judges have this control over the grand jury, lots of times there are no bills where the charges they come back in favor of the system. So, or what we consider as the system, and we throw in all the cops and the prosecutors and the courtroom and everything. But where that was a win for this case here in Texas is, I feel, but not for those changes, there would have been a different outcome. The prosecutor would have just proceeded with those manslaughter charges, but there was a win there because the grand jury upped the charges to murder, which I feel were more appropriate, and the jury felt were appropriate. Now, another win or another opportunity, and where there was a win in this case and another opportunity for us. Now, this case didn't occur in, everyone's area. There are a few people on here, that are in the Dallas area that have a direct connection to this case. But, we feel the pain. We feel the pain in our homes in different cities because this really could have happened to any of us. So looking at the case with an eye for opportunity at every area and to see where there were wins for the way that the system is supposed to work is where we are right now. Hey, Anthony. So after those grand jury, that grand jury upped the charges, that's an area, that's part of our civic duty, that we make sure that we're available for the jury. After that, we have the judge and the prosecutor. The prosecutor did their job, right, in securing the conviction and then also jail time. Now, we know that all cases that are brought up on charges of whatever degree don't always make it to trial because it is normally a matter that is settled out of court. 90% of all cases, whether they are civil or criminal, settle out of court in some type of pretrial matter, whether there's a plea bargain or not. But the prosecutors saw this case through to a verdict and got the verdict of guilty. Now, again, I did say that I didn't like all of the job that was done there, but if cameras were on me doing my job, I'm telling you, there would be a critique whether I got the outcome I looked for or not. So the fact that I didn't particularly care for some of the things that happened in the prosecution aside, they got the conviction. And they also, one thing that is a few legal things that played on in that situation where I can't give a nod to the jobs that were done by the judge and the prosecutor. The case was best tried in Dallas, right? Because Dallas is the place that was affected. Dallas is the place where the police officers and the DAs, Dallas is the place where the crime occurred. Now, the first strategic move of any high-profile case is to get the venue changed so that the audience is not necessarily a jury of people that are surrounded and really personally affected by the situation. So, despite the strategic move of having a change of venue, the judge was able to keep the case in Dallas and seat a jury. Okay? Now, the jury selection is the job of the prosecutor, right? The prosecutor and the defense attorney. Now, I saw lots of commentary because, there's just, people have a lot to say. And there was a particular group that I think also drives this huge level of angst because some people are just mad because there's a group that is called Justice for Guyger. And the tagline is Back the Blue. And there was someone on there that was being ugly. And they said that, they said that the jury was made up of blacks and Mexicans. And so that's why an innocent person got off. Hey, Norma. Now, that comment was stupid. It pissed me off a little bit. It raised my, anxiety level a bit. But it made me really think about that comment and think about the composition of the jury. Now, there's another opportunity for us and where there was a win in this case. The jury that was seated by the prosecution was made up of majority of blacks and Hispanics. Now, that was a win in that the black and Hispanic jury could empathize with the victim, right? They didn't see the victim as just this big bad guy simply because he was a black man. So the win for that case is that not only was the jury one that was personally affected by the situation, having the venue remain there in Dallas, it was also made up of people who could have empathy with the victim. Now, the next part where there was an opportunity or also a win here is that after the jury was seated, right? After the jury was seated, the prosecution did its job and got a conviction and got jail time. Again, y'all, I didn't like the extra instructions. The extra instructions that I feel were gimmies to the defense. But I can say again that the Guyger case was a case where we saw the system work. Now, going back to thinking about that composition of the jury and removing the ugliness that was about that situation. What's up, TG? When I think about the composition of that jury and the comment that was made and that they were made up of mainly blacks and Hispanics, I think about the sentence when I think about that composition. Now, I have long said and been of the opinion that people who hand out jail sentences like it's bread and water have never spent a night in jail. Now, I'll tell you, what's up, y'all? I'll tell you that from experience that one night in jail is no joke. So I've always said that the people who hand out these excessive sentences that for these crimes that and a lot of times are nonviolent, people who hand out these excessive sentences many times do so with racial bias, and they do so because they don't have any empathy. They cannot relate to the defendant. And again, that's the eye for opportunity. The opportunity is there to change the jury pool when answering the call to jury duty. So civic duty, again, is another, it won there. The people who answered the call to jury duty made the right decision in convicting Amber Guyger of murder. And thinking about the conviction, and that's where I was, thinking about the sentence. Now, when you have a jury made up of that demographic, you have people who have families that have been affected by these excessive sentences, whether it is them personally, families that have been torn apart for people serving these long sentences for nonviolent crimes, or coming back and not being able to get jobs and proceed with life. These people who sat in that jury box also could relate to what an impact of a 10-year sentence actually has. Now, the sentence, the possible sentence that could have gone along with this conviction was 5 to 99 years. So the 5-year sentence, some people get that. Okay, some first time offenders and some people that don't have records. Some people get to walk. It is really a case by case basis. But I just really wanted to, and I'm so grateful that you guys came on live and all the good feedback. I want to just go back and look at what Donna's comments were, but I hope that, just, my talk, I wish that we could do a little more of a back and forth, and I'll see how I could do that in the future. But I hope that some of what I said here helps to quell a little bit of angst by, one, explaining a little bit about how the outcome was a win. And it was a win for the system because it actually worked. And it worked in that the people who were supposed to make the charge, they made the right charge. The people who were supposed to see that charge get brought before the jury did so. They picked a good jury, one that could empathize with the victim. And they also convicted the defendant of the charge that was presented. So that's one. And the other thing is how we go forward and what's the game plan to just kind of ease some of this anxiety of where we go next. I brought up the situation of Freddie Grays and the advice that we got from the district attorney there in Baltimore, Marilyn Mosby. That is so valuable because the prosecutors who bring the right charges here, the grand jury was the one that did, the job of upping the charges here. But for those who bring the right charges, they have to have some legs to stand on so that they are able to get past that fear, right? That I was in fear for my life of doing my job. So that they get past that, they need some laws that prescribe action. What action constitute negligence? What action constitutes recklessness? If those things are clear, prosecutors can make the case. When you make a case, and especially a criminal case, because the standard is so high, the standard in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. We've seen the system not work. We've seen the injustice, and there are a lot of reasons why. Sometimes there's overzealous prosecution. Again, our civic duty has, some say there. We've seen the jurors be have racial bias and get it wrong, again, our civic duty has an answer there. Show up to jury duty. And we've seen a lot of things go wrong along the way. But if we give prosecutors, I tried this new matte lipstick. It's not MAC. That's probably why I feel so the way that it does. But if you guys start seeing me lick my lips, that's why. But if we just take the opportunity right there and give these prosecutors the legs that they need to stand on, prescribing what constitutes these mental states that they need to prove their cases, then, we may be able to see some different outcomes. Again, your vote, I am going to continue to do political commentary for one moment. After I did the Democratic National Debate, I have some content that didn't get printed because of the tropical storm Imelda, and it gave me a little bit of setback, but I'm going to share it with you guys anyway, because the focus that we need to turn to right now, in my opinion, is the civic duty that we have in, one, electing a new president, and two, electing the folks that are around us that really make our world work. Our vote is everything. Our vote picks our prosecutors. Our vote puts the laws on the books, or our vote picks the representatives who go down and champion for the laws that we want on the books. Everything boils back down to our civic duty. After our vote, it requires our accountability that we stay on these lawmakers that we choose, for them to go down and put those things on the books that matter, like simply restraining a human being by putting your hand around their neck is negligent conduct by an officer. Stuff like that. Things that make it easier for them to connect the dots when they're faced with such a high burden of proof. Now, our vote does matter. Yes, Kelly. Yes. Our vote absolutely matters. Our vote is everything. And I can't say it enough. And our democracy is everything. Our civic engagement, knowing what these people are saying, knowing whether or not they can accomplish the things that they're saying, knowing the way that our framework works, knowing that's how we change stuff. And I'll say this really quickly before I get off, that, our vote is everything, and our civic engagement, answering the call of jury duty, is how we get to the next steps, holding our lawmakers accountable. I had the conversation with another friend of mine where I said that voter suppression and disenfranchisement are real things, right? People do that for a reason. People don't want you to vote for a reason. People want you to be disenfranchised and not be involved in the system and be involved in making the rules. They want you not to do that. Because that's the way the world works. And so right now we're in a state of corporate governance where we have mostly corporations making everything work through lobbying and Citizens United and all kinds of other things. But really the power lies with us in shaping the outcomes that we want. And it all boils down to civic duty. Understanding what's going on, knowing who runs things, who makes it work, how do they make it work, what do they need, what are the tools that they need to make it work. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm your girl. That's why I am your infotainer. I will be back tomorrow live because I think this is my space, y'all. I think live is my space. What y'all think? Y'all think live is my space? I think live is my space. I'm going to come back. I'm going to share that information with you. It's really long, you guys. And I think that the logistical issues with Imelda and the length of the content that I had from the third debate is the reason why it didn't make it to print. But I want to share it with you guys because really what we have to keep our eye on, and even past this impeachment inquiry, which we'll talk about later, what we have to keep our eye on is who we are going to see next. What are we doing? What platform are they going to stand on? What are we going to pressure lawmakers to do? Who can do the things that we need them to do in order for this to feel like our space, right? Because we the people. All right, y'all. Real. I'm going to come back live because this is my space. I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching me live and giving me the inspiration to just keep going. I'm going to come back. I'm going to go live again tomorrow. I'm going to start doing my podcast live. How about that? I'm going to just join you guys live at 5. Your girl, Nicole and Gray. That's how we going to do it. Podcast live. I'm sharing my content from that was not printed. What's up, Kanisha? That wasn't printed in Houston Style Magazine. You'll be able to check it out on my blog, but please go and do that because it'll set you right. We got the 4th Democratic National Debate that's coming up. While we've got our representatives that are on recess while this inquiry is brewing, we have the next Democratic National Debate that's going to be coming up on the same day that the House comes back from its recess. We've got the candidates going to address a town hall on the 10th. We need to start narrowing down the field. So I'm going to post that information. I'll put a link to that information in these comments. What's that? That's all right, Kanisha. I'm going to go live at 5 every day. That's what I'm going to do. And if the time needs to change, we'll change it because I want to talk to my friends. I believe that this is my space. And we just going to go with it like that. I'm coming at you guys again tomorrow live at 5. I'm going to do my podcast here till tomorrow is Fight Me Friday. We going to fight. All right, y'all. It's been real. Your girl, Nicole and Gray. To be clear, hashtag the gray area. Like, follow, and share. I get paid by likes. That's how I get paid. All right, you guys. I'll let you later.